Well, I'd like to thank New Roads for having us here to have a conversation with you all, and thank you for sharing your personal story. Gage, McKaylee, Amanda, and Alex, thank you so much for coming on camera and consenting to talk about your addiction and the treatment and where you are in life. It's really admirable. So I'll just start by asking the question of all of you, and we'd just like to have a discussion about this. When did you first become addicted, and when did you personally know that you had an addiction problem?
I started drugs at an early age, around 13. I mean, I started, smoking pot and drinking and partying. When I really started realizing it was getting to be a problem was like probably about 5 years ago. That's when I really realized it was getting out of control. I mean, I was, getting kicked out of moving situations, going to jail. It just wasn't the life I wanted to lead, to be honest. So, I had to make a change.
And about what time did your family start to know that you had a drug problem? You mentioned you started when you were 13, but at what point did it become critical for either you or your family?
At high school. I mean, they kind of had some suspicions in middle school, but it was high school was when it really got bad. Mm-hmm. Just snuck out all the time, partied as much as I could. I thought, life was all about having fun, and it's not. You gotta work hard first and then play later.
Mm-hmm. So at what point did you start treatment?
I started treatment 2010. I went to a treatment center called Highland Ridge, but it wasn't on my own accord.
Okay.
My parents I crashed my car, my parents kind of forced me into it, and I didn't want to be there. Okay. I didn't feel like I had a problem around that time.
Yeah. Okay, so let's ask the same questions. When did you start using drugs? What kind of drugs, and when did you know that there was a problem?
I probably started to mess around with pain pills and pot and alcohol. In junior high, I was probably 12 or 13. The first time I went to an outpatient treatment, I was 15 years old, and it was for heroin and crack cocaine. I think that my mom, of course they knew, but they didn't know the extent of what I was going through. And it was 2010, I was 18 when I finally decided that I was ready for residential treatment. And that's the first time I went on my own to say I have problems.
So unlike Gage, you decided to go to treatment on your own, whereas Gage's first experience with treatment was forced, as you put it, by your parents?
Yeah.
That's really interesting, okay.
My addiction didn't start until I was 20 years old. I grew up around it with a father as an addict, so it was something I kind of told myself that I would never do. And then I lost my father to suicide, and it became a way for me to understand. And so I played around with alcohol a little bit through high school. I think I had smoked weed once or twice, but the first drug I did was heroin, and it was almost instant. My family found out within about 6 months, and then I checked into my first treatment center in 2012 for heroin and cocaine.
Tell us about that first hit of heroin. How did you take it? What did it feel like? Did you know that instantly you had an addiction? I mean, can you share that first moment with us?
Like I said, it was just to understand exactly why somebody would throw their life away to a substance. But once I did it, I realized that I didn't feel any emotions anymore. I was completely numb. I remember being really sick the first time that I did it, but that didn't bother me. After I did it once, I did it again, and I didn't know much about the substance, so by the time that I realized it made you sick if you didn't have it, I was already in too deep, and so at that point, I didn't want to be sick, so I kept using.
How often do you have to use to avoid that sick feeling when you're taking heroin?
It depends on the person, really, but I was doing quite a bit, so at the worst part of my addiction, it would wake me up about every 3 to 4 hours.
How do you financially support a heroin habit like that? I mean, I know it's expensive. How expensive is it, and what do you resort to in order to support that addiction of every 3 to 4 hours?
Before I started using, I was pretty good with finances. I had an apartment, I had the car, I had the bank account, but I quickly lost all of that, and I would resort to selling everything that I owned, taking out personal loans. I stopped paying all of my bills. It really put me in a really bad financial spot that I'm still trying to get out of today. So,
share your story with us when you when you first started, when you knew you had a problem, your first
Yeah.
experience with?
So like my first time like going to treatment was in 2010, but I started use at like 14, 13. And 14 is when I started using every day, smoking weed. I found out my dad was having an affair while he was on business trips. So I like kept a secret for like 6 months, and I started using during that time, and then it just went out of control. It just started getting worse and worse, like from like smoking weed to doing ecstasy to doing, and then it went to bath salts, and I went to treatment my first time in 2010, and I went because I had a court date, because I did illegal stuff, so I had court, and so I went to treatment before I had to go to court to like get out of like whatever they were gonna make me do. So I got put on probation, and that's when I started doing like all this, mostly just strictly like synthetic drugs, because I couldn't test for them at that time in probation. And then I've just been in and out. About 7 treatments later, and now I'm here. So.
And you shared with me off camera that you had come to Utah from Minnesota.
Yeah.
And that your parents had recommended that this was one place to come. Why was Utah a good option for treatment and not Minnesota for you?
For me, it was just like the change of scenery, like I wanted, and like at first I was like, obvious, like Utah, like what's in Utah, and like my dad was like, well, it's not religious based or anything, so I'm like, okay, like I'll go, like, and I mean I liked it, like obviously it's still treatment, but it was a nice change of scenery, but obviously it didn't change my mind to like stay here for good.
So those were some reasons. Were there any financial reasons, insurance reasons? I mean, was Utah easier to get treatment for than Minnesota, or were there none of those?
I mean, like there's like plenty of treatments in like Minnesota has
Sure.
like a lot of treatments and like a big sober community and everything. But I guess part of it could be like the insurance. Like my dad lives in California, so like it's kind of, he has like a West Coast type of insurance, so it's like here. So like here's technically like West Coast. But really it was just like a change of scenery. Like there's a huge sober community out in Utah, which I had no idea about. But
I think it was Karl Malone that when he got drafted to the Utah Jazz asked, what state is Utah in? So you're not the only one that didn't know Utah didn't exist. Gage, I couldn't help but notice when Amanda was telling her story about her first hit of heroin and getting involved in heroin, you kind of reacted to that and were shaking your head. And I'm just curious why.
It just, I mean, it's really hard to explain. It's an awesome feeling. Yeah, I got sick too, like she said. But it just grabs you instantly. Like I really can't explain it any better than that. Like it's an awesome feeling, I guess, you know. And I've gotten to the point now where I don't want it anymore. But still in the back of my mind, I still have that, you know, like maybe I can do it and be okay. You know, it's
powerful.
Yeah, it's hard. It definitely is hard.
So would you categorize it as the first time you did it, you knew that then you would have that desire for your whole life? I mean, did you know that you would be addicted immediately? And that, I mean, do you know that when you do that?
No, like I started using pain pills, like because I used to, well, I still do, but I like to lift, and when I use pain pills, you get a better pump, everything else, and it just kind of started to be outside the gym atmosphere, and then just using because I thought it felt good.
I think prescription drugs are a problem, so let's shift gears to that. Where did you first get the prescription drugs? Were they prescribed? And then how do you go about getting them after that supply runs out?
Medicine cabinets, people sell them, doctor shopping. Like there's multiple ways to get it. I mean,
Tell us about doctor shopping. What is doctor shopping?
Just going to different doctors and like saying you have a problem pain-wise, and you know, I use the fact that my back hurt, or you know, like.
Okay. Who here doctor shopped for prescription pills? So do you think that that's common in the state of Utah?
Oh yeah.
People doctor shopping. Do you think there's anything that the state can do better to eliminate doctor shopping, or would that force more people to buy them illegally on the street?
Well, they're already like cracking down on that, I think. You know, they really are. Like, I mean, like the past 4 years, it's pretty hard to be honest, because they have, you know, records of every doctor and every You
Right.
know, thing you get. It's
Right.
I can't remember what form it is, but
Gel form.
yeah.
They changed all of the types of prescriptions that were really popular to abuse to being like gel form, where you can't melt them down and shoot them up or crush them up and snort them. So they're all pretty much time release, and a lot of people don't want to buy those and use them.
Okay, so you think that there has been strides made to help with the doctor shopping problem, especially with prescription drugs?
But it drove us to heroin though too.
Okay, how does that then drive you to heroin? Because I think this is a really important point.
Well, the fact that, you know, you don't want to be sick and somebody says, well, here, try this. It won't make you sick, you know, and it's cheaper. It's like, well, why not?
So how do you use that heroin?
You can smoke it. I guess how I used to use it the most, but every once in a while at IV, you know, when it was convenient to me. I know if I would have gone further down that path, I probably would have been an everyday IV user, but I didn't want to get that bad. I really didn't. I wanted to nip it in the bud before it got any worse than it was. Because I was already couldn't hold a job. I already, you know, couldn't pay for insurance, living expenses. I mean, it was getting bad. I just, I had enough.
Okay. How much, if a couple of you said you started when you were 13, and is that about, I mean, you said 20, but I think you both said that you started when you were about 13. What can a parent that's watching this program tell a 13-year-old or 14-year-old about drinking and drugs to help them avoid the addiction issues that you've faced in your life?
Well, just, I think the biggest thing, I mean, for me, it was because I had problems with self-worth. I saw all the cool kids, you know, like having fun, doing all that, being popular, and I want to do the exact same thing. I mean, it's kind of a cliche thing to say, but it's true, you know, and I think a lot of parents should just maybe tell their kids that, you know, it's okay to be the smart one. It's okay to be the quiet one. It's okay to just be yourself, because, I mean, for me, the biggest thing was I felt like I was an outcast, but now I see, like, for instance, my sister, she was one of those people, but she didn't turn to drugs. She kept on with it, being the smarts and all that. And now she has the opportunity to be that normal person that can go out and have a drink and have fun with her friends, but she just, you know, bloomed a little later, I guess, you know, and that's okay, you know. Once you get, you know, that maturity level in you, it makes it a little easier.
Okay.
I think it comes down to a lot of like communication and structure. I came from like a broken kind of family, and I'm the only child from my mom and my dad. And so it was like there was lots of assumptions being made on both sides, but I don't ever remember having talks about alcohol or drugs or sex, anything, partying. It was not an open topic in our house. And there wasn't a lot of structure because of the two of them. If I got upset about something, I'm going to my dad's, whatever, and my dad would let me get away with something, or vice versa. And discipline, I was a complete brat, and whether they wanted me to do something or not, I did whatever I wanted. But like Gage said, they're really accessible in like friends and families' bathrooms and whatever, all over the house. I remember it all the time. Wherever we went, there was pain pills, and I hung out with a little bit older crowd, and they taught me what to do, and it was really easy to walk in to someone's house on a lunch break and walk into someone's grandma's bathroom, and there's a whole prescription of Lortab, and that's when it all started.
Did you ever take prescription drugs from a house where the occupants were home, where somebody's mom and dad was home, but you were in their bathroom going through their medicine cabinet?
Yeah.
Yeah. And was that all happen to you too, Gage?
You can learn to be really sneaky.
So part of society helping with this problem is being more responsible with their prescription drugs, because we have, you know, everyday citizens have people in their homes that, you know, that have maybe addiction problems, and they're rifling through the drawers and the medicine cabinets. How has your addiction problem impacted your family? Amanda, do you want to start?
For me, it's been kind of a different situation, because I did grow up in kind of surrounded with substances. I was very educated on them, and I was always the one that my family thought they didn't have to worry about, because I always told myself I wouldn't be that way. So when my family found out that I was using, it kind of it kind of tore everything apart there for a minute. It was very hard for everybody to accept. The first time that I went to treatment, everybody was pushing me to go to treatment, and I was okay with that. I was kind of given the ultimatum to either go to jail or go to treatment. At that point, I decided to go to treatment. I'd have to say that the person that it impacted the most was my younger sister. Just, she didn't see a lot of it growing up. She's 6 years younger. So by the time she was old enough to realize what was going on, my dad had cleaned up or he was no longer around. So the impact of my use has been hard. It's been very hard on the family, and it's still an ongoing process to get the relationship back today. I tend to get some clean time and then I go back out, so building that trust back up has been difficult, and sometimes it's frustrating knowing that they're not in my court all the time, but then I have to take a step back and realize how many times I have gone back out and how many times I have kind of put that fear in them. So it's an ongoing journey, and it's something that I still have to work on every day, but we're getting there.
Good job. Congratulations for rebuilding those relationships. Alex, you mentioned your dad a couple of times. What's your relationship like with your dad now? How much do you talk to him, and how important is the support of your family in dealing with an addiction problem?
I mean, my dad's not, I see him about once a year, so not very often. I mean, he's really like financially stable for me, like helping me out with like let me be on his insurance and stuff. But other than that, like it's not what it has really ever been in the first place. Like I didn't like, he was always on like business trips and stuff, so he was only home on the weekends. And then eventually, like when I came out with like the whole finding it, like telling my sister and my mom that he was cheating on my mom, that he just up and left really. But he really lately, he's been really like helpful with certain things, but it's just not the relationship that I've really wanted. But but with just family in general, like it's hard for like having my family like so far away, like even though it's only like a 2.5 hour flight, it's still hard not having them here. Like just locally, it's like, oh, I can't just go to my mom's house and be like, hey, like just like get like from like a hug or anything, just like having something like that. It's hard, like, but at the same time, like it's better for me to be here than it is to be back there, because I feel like I'm more of a burden, and like I keep my mom awake, and like that's what I used to, like my mom wouldn't sleep, like she'd wonder if she's gonna get a call like from like the police or from wherever, like wondering where I am. And like it's nice to like have this much time like I've been sober, and like my mom like really can just sleep easy and doesn't worry about me like half the time like she used to.
So let me thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Alex, I appreciate that. Let me ask you all a general question, and then I want to kind of talk about treatment and what treatment has done for you, what's been effective, and maybe give some advice to people who are out there that maybe are thinking about getting treatment that maybe haven't or have relapsed. You walk around society every day. I mean, you shared with us the job that you just most recently had, and you see everyday people out in society. What do you think the most common misconception is about people with addiction problems? And are there more than people think out there that are not seeing the world through that lens? Are there less? I mean, what's the biggest misconception?
We're not bad people. Like, we're not. We have good hearts. It's just when you're suffering and you're hurting for a substance, it's almost like you will do anything for it. Like you don't want to hurt anymore, and that's an instant feel good. You know, you're done being sick. You know, I mean, yeah, we have stole some stuff, but it doesn't make us bad people. We do have guilt. We are ashamed of what we've done, and we are making amends slowly but surely as we get sober. And I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions that people have of us.
Do people say things to you? Is it the way they treat you? Is it the way they look at you?
It's more like the look, and just like how like people are kind of, I guess you could say they kind of shy away from you because they don't know like what to expect. Like we're kind of like aliens or something.
Okay. So is it a judgmental look? Is it a look of misunderstanding? They really don't understand
Kind of mix
the
of
issue.
both.
A little bit of both.
Both, yeah.
Okay. Anybody have anything to add to that? Common misconceptions of addiction?
I think that a lot of people that don't understand think that it's something that happens like intentionally. I mean, for myself, I definitely intentionally like went out and dabbled in things that I shouldn't have, but I had no idea at the time that it was going to grab me and take me like it did. And the decisions that I made while I was using aren't decisions that I would make in my right mind. And I think that there's a lot of things that people do, myself included, that like you don't realize what your choice is, how deeply they're going to affect other people. And really, that's what addiction does, is make you super self-centered. And it's not something that's intentional. And I think that my family suffered a lot, my friends suffered a lot, but there's things that I was suffering from as well. And now that I'm in my right mind, like Gage said, I can make amends for those things that I did wrong. And I do think that people misunderstand it, and there's lots of judgments thrown around. But more recently, I think that almost everyone's affected by addiction. If there's not somebody like in your family that's an addict, that there's someone that's close to them that is. I think that I see it more often than not.
So you think it's a bigger problem in society than most people know or think of?
Totally.
How often were you offered drugs? And when people know in that world that you're an addict, do they approach you? Do they actively sell to you? I mean, do you get approached even now by people offering you to buy drugs from them?
For me, there's definitely like parts of Salt Lake City that I have to avoid. Once you have, I don't know how else to word this, but once you've like been in the game, you know where to get it. And there are certain streets in this town that you can walk down and people will just approach you for it. So being in treatment, you definitely learn people and places that you have to avoid.
Are those streets all around us? I mean, are they in every? Are they all along this valley, or is there a couple of them? Or I mean, I have no idea where they are, and I think most people watching the program don't. I mean, how prevalent is that?
For me, growing up in Sandy, like I do know places around here where I can go to get them, but the more prominent places are like downtown Salt Lake City. There's a couple streets down there that if you walk down, you can find it, and that's kind of something that we have to deal with every day. We've had to learn to avoid those areas.
West Valley too.
Yeah, West Valley.
So certain streets, certain places where you just know if you go, that opportunity will arise.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can't imagine how hard that is to be dealing with an addiction and know if you just go to a certain place that you can fix that craving. Do you fight that a lot? I mean, is that something that occurs in your mind frequently, or how often does that happen?
I think that
less
it
and
gets
less.
easier with time. Definitely when you go from residential to coming up to the transitional living, it's a little more difficult because all of a sudden you have more freedom than you had. And we have to do different modules, like learn how to take public transportation and do all of these different things. And so it's definitely something that's a little more difficult at the beginning, but as you process it and you talk about it, it gets a little bit easier to deal with those locations, and you learn how to better avoid them.
Is it a certain demographic of society? In other words, is it a certain age group that is using? Is it mom and dads that are in middle aged? Is it the teenage user who's using for the first time? I mean, I know drugs are no respecter of age, but in your experience out there on the street, is it a certain group of people that you could categorize?
16 to 28 probably around.
I feel like it's
You're shaking your head saying no.
Yeah.
I mean, the last few years of substance abuse was pain pills and alcohol, and it was a grand scheme from 65 to 15 years old.
Okay. And obviously that's true. I mean, addiction is no respecter of age, but I just wondered if in the groups you all were in, because you're all a very similar age, that you saw a more prevalent problem or epidemic with a certain age group.
I would say just like in general, like even certain like the younger age group for like treatments, like anywhere from like pretty much 18 to like 29, like, and there's a big age group that is using in that in that part, and that's like a lot of people are like just hitting their bottoms at that point in their life, like hitting the low point. But some people keep going, and like really like it's hard with opiate users. From what I've noticed, is that there's not many like 50-year-old opiate addicts, heroin addicts, whatever.
They overdose.
They overdose. Gage, how many functioning addicts with heroin and Oxycontin and those types of drugs are there in society that are taking those and going to work and leading everyday normal lives, at least apparently normal to most people?
Yeah, well, I guess it all depends on how long you have the supply, because you can be okay, you know, for a while, but the minute you run out of money and the minute, you know, there's no drugs to be sold, whether they got caught or not, you lose your job, you lose your house, and then you just start back over, start at rock bottom, and that's, you know, when you get really desperate and start doing things you don't want to do.
Yeah. Well, let's shift gears and thank you for sharing that. Let's shift gears and talk about New Roads. What brought you to this specific treatment center? This treatment center is primarily provided and paid for by the patients that come in. There are a lot of facilities around the state that are paid for by state and federal tax dollars. What brought you to this treatment facility, and what about it has been helpful in you overcoming your addiction?
Well, my mom put it in the best way possible. Like most rehabs are 30-day programs, and they let you out into the world. What this program does is basically doesn't just put you out in the ocean and tell you to swim. They give you a boat. You know, and they help you, you know, get back into society, help you learn the life skills, whether it be cooking, cleaning, filling up boredom with things that you really need to do in life that normal people do, which we've kind of thought, you know, what we do for fun is party, you know.
So when I get bored,
yeah,
I resort to drugs and alcohol, as opposed to, when I get bored, there are things to do to make me productive.
yeah,
Okay.
you know, and you know, clean lifestyle, you have a clean head too. So
Okay. That's a great term. Clean lifestyle, clean head. I like that.
So this time around, getting into treatment was really scary. I've been through New Roads twice before, but this time I have a 10-month-old son involved. I went to a detox in July, and I thought that I was just going to go through detox and then kind of like what Gage said, just be thrown out in the ocean and learn how to swim. There's 2 that I know of, mother and children programs in the state of Utah that are county funded. And the waiting list to get into those was something that, like, if I was put back on the streets, I would wait 4 months to get into something like that. And I didn't have that kind of time. So it was kind of like an act of God or grace or luck, whatever you want to call it, that I got a phone call from the program director, had got a hold of, or the CEO had got a hold of a previous therapist that was working with me, and said that they were going to take me in and try and do stuff with the Medicaid that I was working with my son and I. It's not happening as of yet, so I'm scholarshiped at this point, but it is really scary knowing that there is county funding and there is things that you can do, but it's hard. And as big as an epidemic as like addiction and treatment is right now, I think that like when somebody makes up their mind to go to treatment, it has to be like at that time. Like
You
if
can't tell them, hey, wait 4 months.
yeah, if I
and we'll-
was
yeah.
if I would have got out of detox, which was a ridiculous amount of money because I didn't have insurance at the time, I would have been put back on the streets and been right back where I was until a bed or whatever came open, and then they don't take you because you're not clean. So it's hard, but
It's a vicious cycle.
yeah.
I can't imagine what it feels like. I mean, what do you feel like when you know you're at the whim of bureaucracy like that or a waiting list? I mean, how does that feel?
It was really actually devastating because I didn't think that that's what was going to happen. I thought that I would be back in my hometown, and I knew that if that was the case, that I would just be right back where I was. So it's really scary,
I bet.
especially when I have somebody else's life depending on it, not just my own.
Yeah, I bet that changed the outlook
completely.
in a major way. Thanks for sharing that. What else do you guys have to share or offer that I haven't asked? I mean, you've probably had some thoughts along the way as we've talked and discussed this really important issue. What stands out in your mind that you'd like to share that we haven't covered?
I would just, it's like kind of like what McKaylee was just saying. It's very important that as soon as you feel like you're ready to go to rehab, that you go, because you can lose everything in a split second, and especially with an addiction to any sort of opiate, heroin, pain pills, anything. It's kind of it's a gamble with the devil every day. It's a life or death scenario. Each time that you do one of those pills or that you smoke heroin or shoot heroin, you really don't know if it's going to be your last time. So if you finally are to your breaking point and feel like you are ready for rehab, it's very urgent that you do it as soon as possible. I think that a couple years ago, like the big epidemic was meth, and it's turned to heroin, and it's much easier to overdose on heroin. This year alone, we've lost 2 people that came through this program, and that's been a real big eye-opening experience for a lot of us that are here.
Have any of you had experience with our criminal justice system related to your drug addictions?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you mind sharing that story with us, Gage?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I've been like on probation multiple times, and they put me through outpatient and stuff, but it's not my choice, and I really felt it really didn't do much for me. I feel that, they make you pay all these fines, make you do all this stuff, and when you're trying to get off a drug, and it just doesn't help. It really doesn't.
So the fine and the incarceration
Yeah.
and all the punishments that some of the courts are doling out really aren't doing anything, is what you're saying.
Yeah, you go to jail and you end up finding more hookups than you started with. And it just snowballs from there.
So what would be a better alternative? I mean, if you were the governor tomorrow, what would be your proposal? I mean, seriously, what would you do to change that?
I wouldn't say decriminalize drugs, but don't put so much resources into, incarcerating people who are using drugs, but put more resources into helping them get better. Because there are people out there that would die to have what I have right now. Mm-hmm. And I mean, if putting in people who don't want to be helped in rehabs can be doing no good. You have to want it in order to get better.
That's very well said. Thank you for sharing
I think that we talked a little bit about cycles earlier, and I've been in trouble a few times, but I've also been really close to people that have gone through drug court, which is like the main thing that you go through when you get charges for substance abuse or whatever, and it's seriously like a cycle. You get your first charge and you can't get a job, you can't do anything, so you're forced to go back where you came from with your parents, not have a job, and you're stuck trying to figure out what to do. And I really think that I think that drug court for the most part can be an amazing resource if that's what somebody wants, but there's also other things than like an outpatient type of program that can benefit addicts going through the court system. And I think a lot of people just comply to drug court because it's something that will get your charges dropped so that you do have hope of getting a job and being able to like live a normal life. But you hook up with just as many people that don't want to be sober, and you're stuck in that system paying fines and living with family and being on probation. And when there's other alternatives out there, like a residential program or any kind of treatment that's actual treatment.
Mm-hmm. So is it fair to say that they're punishing the past behavior instead of trying to rehabilitate and future behavior by teaching people life skills, as we discussed earlier? Is that pretty much it?
Yep, I think so.
So the system's built to punish the past behavior and not maybe help empower the future behavior.
I know that for my father that struggled with his addiction, he spent some time in federal prison, and one of the things that he struggled with the most was kind of like what Gage was saying earlier. They just released him. He went back into the ocean and had to swim. Mm-hmm. And whenever he had any sort of interaction with any type of criminal justice or anything. It was always, his past was always brought up. And once you have that record, it's hard to escape it. And it's hard to move forward with your life when you're constantly being pressured about it. So.
Like I know like a lot of things, like the past is the past for like a lot of us. Like we try not to really like dwell on it, and you got to look more towards the future, even though the past was pretty bad.
Where do you see yourself in 5 years, given where you are right now?
Helping people like me. I want to become a counselor of some sort. I want to put the horrors and all the things I've been through to good use. I
Very
feel
admirable.
really strongly about that.
It's very admirable.
I think that it's really hard to say for sure where I'll be in 5 years, but I hope to just be living what society would be calling a normal life and a successful mother.
Great. It's a great goal.
Kind of like McKaylee, it's kind of hard to say where I'll be in 5 years. I try not to think that far ahead. It kind of freaks me out a little
Sure,
bit. But
sure.
definitely sharing my story. I kind of feel like if I can tell my story to 100 people and it saves one person from going through the nightmare that I've had to go through, then that makes it all worth it to me. And just living as a successful member in society, doing my part.
So what would you tell the teenagers out there that are entering those years where they think it's cool to party and maybe not study? What do you tell them so that they listen and they don't make the same mistake?
You know,
What would you tell them?
I had to learn on my own, but it's not as fun as it's portrayed to be. It's definitely a false image. It's not fun for long. The fun fades away very quickly, and it becomes a nightmare that is very hard to escape. So just continue going through school and think about your future. At that time, life isn't about just partying all the time. There's a lot more to it.
How many of you would agree that marijuana and alcohol and marijuana is the gateway to other drugs? I mean, that's often argued, right? In states like Colorado where marijuana is legalized, and they say it's not a gateway drug, it's a recreational drug. How would you categorize that, Gabe?
I think it's definitely a gateway drug. I mean, for me, I can't go back to smoking pot. I can't go back to drinking because the minute I know somebody who can drink, I know somebody who has pot, and that pot person knows about somebody who has Xanax, and they know somebody who has heroin. So it's just a slow ladder, but it will get you.
Are you surprised that there are states like Colorado that have legalized marijuana?
Not really. I mean, I have no big problem with marijuana, but I do think that, if used the wrong way in a party atmosphere or whatnot, it can just get out of hand.
Anybody have any thoughts on that?
I think like that, there's obviously like Colorado and a few other states have like recreationally made it legal, but I feel like there's some people that can use marijuana recreationally. And for me, and I can't probably speak for all, but I'm not someone who can just recreationally use weed.
Do you think that's part of the problem, that the addict doesn't know their genetic or physiological disposition until they've tried it, and then at that point it's too late?
Yeah.
As you outlined, Amanda, for us, that once you did heroin, you didn't know that you would need it to not feel sick, and then pretty soon you're a heroin addict. Do you think a lot of people, you just don't know which person you are until it's too late?
Yeah, I think so. I think that a lot of people do it out of fun, and then they realize that they get a head change out of it, and going from doing it once a week to 3 times a week, and then once you get a head change from marijuana and alcohol, you want more of a head change, and you know that a different substance will give you that bigger head change that you're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
So it slowly escalates into something bigger and something that you did not expect at all.
Mm-hmm. Did you guys at any point, and this may be one of our last questions, did you at any point consider yourself a criminal? Did you ever look at yourself and say, I'm breaking the law, I'm a criminal, or did you view yourself as an addict that needed help?
An addict that needed help for sure.
I don't think that when you're in it, you like to lie to yourself just as much as you like to lie to the next person. And so for the longest time, I tried to tell myself that I was okay and that I was going to be okay. But I definitely think that I was completely aware of what I was doing, just nothing I could do about it, helpless.
For me, I didn't really see that side until after I got sober.
You mean the criminal side?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't concerned about all of that while I was using. That was not a priority to me. My priority was my next high, but once I got sober, I started realizing the things that I had done and realized how bad my addiction had really gotten.
I would say like really, it's the same for me as like as Amanda said, like I didn't realize like all this stuff like in my past, like since like 14 whatever, using mostly every day, that when I went to treatment the first time, it was like brought up that I was addicted to drugs and alcohol, and I didn't realize that. And then I'd look back and I'd be like, oh, well maybe I have a problem. Well, maybe that I'm like chemically dependent, or maybe I'm self-medicating with the drugs, that I need to like find something that will help me. But I would say like even society sees like addicts as criminals before like they see like the actual thing. That's like more like the question you asked earlier was like the stereotype of like that they're criminals first, but then they have a drug problem.
Yeah, and maybe the criminal justice system treats you as a criminal first instead of as an addict first. And maybe there's room for both. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think that's the debate that we're entering into here is what do we do to reduce addiction and maybe avoid addiction in the first place and then reduce it and help the people that really need it the most.
Well, the real big thing is like addiction is a disease. Sure. Like it progresses. It can, what I was told, like can be in remission even after like being so long sober. Like it's a disease and it progresses. Like even if you put it down for however long, I've put it down, not used drugs for 9 months, but then I go back to it and I'm doing as much as I was before, like, and so it's a disease, and like a lot of people don't think it's a disease, they think it's a choice. Mm-hmm. And it's not. When you get to a certain point, it's not your choice to like get high it just not your choice anymore.
Okay. Last question. I watched the Super Bowl. I was rooting for the New England Patriots. Did you guys watch the Super Bowl? Yeah, you a Super Bowl fan? Or who are you rooting for?
I was rooting for the Seahawks.
Okay, perfect. My question is right to you, Gage. So I was watching the Super Bowl, and of course that final play of the game or thereabouts.
Yeah.
You know, some people call the worst play call. We won't get into that. We're not football experts. But although I do pretend to be
If he caught
when
it,
I
it
watch
wouldn't have been
football.
the worst play called. You know?
It could be, yeah. But for me to see that pass intercepted and the game essentially end was quite an adrenaline rush, right? Like I got a lot out of that. Like, yes, my team won, you know?
Yeah.
Or when I watched John Stockton, you guys are way too young for this, hit that shot to send the Utah Jazz to the NBA Finals. I remember I jumped so high I hit my hand on the ceiling, which wasn't an 8-foot ceiling, it was a little bit higher. Not much. But is getting high, is that what getting high feels like? Or is it, how would you describe getting high, the feeling of getting high to somebody who doesn't know?
You know, that adrenaline rush is almost what happens before you get high. Like it's the getting it. It's I'm doing something bad. Like it's the excitement of getting it, and then when you do get it, it's like that reward. You're just like, oh, it feels good. It's.
So I can only relate that to the way it feels to find your next hit, but not necessarily what the hit feels like. Yeah. Is that fair?
I would say like your first time like doing like your drug of choice is like you try to get that again after you've done it the first time, you're always like chasing that same high that you got from then. And for me, I never found that same thing. I never felt the same way I first did when I first like.
But you think it's out there.
Yeah, like exactly. Like I think it's out there, like, and I'm just wanting it and like going after it. Like I'll feel that same way I did when I first did bath salts, whatever. Like I want to feel the same way I did, but I never felt the same way.
I think that Alex touched on something really good that we haven't really talked about.
Okay.
And he said something like self-medicating, and I think that that's something that also should be brought to light with addiction awareness or whatever. Mental health really goes hand in hand. Mm-hmm. And before I was treated, before I came to treatment, I had gone through like psychiatrists and antidepressants and anti-anxiety, bipolar, whatever, and I think that that's really what it boiled down to. And you see it all over in the news, people making decisions that have mental health that's not being treated. And I think that once I was finally able to like understand and accept like my mental health diagnosis, it was a lot easier for me to move forward and staying sober.
Do you think mental health is taboo, meaning it's okay to have diabetes or asthma, but it's not okay to be mentally not well? In other words, the physical ailments we can all admit to and they're okay and we go get treatment for them, but the mental illnesses we really can't admit to. I mean, are they not that accepted in society? Do you think that's part of the problem?
I think that they're not accepted as much as other things are, and they get taken advantage of.
Do you think you were misdiagnosed or the treatments didn't work?
I was misdiagnosed.
What was
yeah.
the misdiagnosis?
Bipolar.
Okay. And then that you're saying led you to,
And I think I started to self-medicate, definitely.
Okay.
I didn't feel anything. You don't, everything that you're worried about and all of like the ruckus that's going on inside your head and your heart pounding, like you take your pill or your hit or whatever and it's gone. You don't worry about any of it.
I think for me, the issue was that I had these mental disorders and I wasn't aware of them. I had lived with anxiety and depression for so long without being diagnosed that I began self-medicating because I didn't even realize I had an issue. And it took me having my substance abuse issue and coming to treatment to realize that there was an underlying issue.
I wanted to piggyback off something that Amanda said with her leaving Greg Marks. If I could leave a message with anybody that could help them get out of something, like I just want like the younger generation that I see more and more of, even my family, like getting involved into the wrong types of things. Like there's not one person that's unique, and this addiction doesn't discriminate. It doesn't matter if you're from the hills or if you're from like Skid Row. It doesn't matter. Not one person's unique to it, and you dabble with the wrong people or the wrong type of things and it will take you down faster than you think that it will.
I bet you've all lost people that you've known along the way. I know people who I've lost along the way, and I think you said it right earlier that this touches all families and all people. This is not a problem that any one person can judge somebody else for doing. We all live in families and societies and neighborhoods where drugs are an epidemic. And your stories today, shedding light on that, has been both a serious reality check for me, and I know other people watching the program, but it's also, I'm sure, been an inspiration, especially your parting words, Amanda, of telling people that now's the time to get treatment. And hopefully our politicians are also listening to your cry out saying, hey, when you're ready for treatment, and you, Gage, gave a big nod when she said, you know, when you decide you need treatment, you need it right now. And hopefully our politicians are watching that, and that there's ways to get additional funds to help people when they hit that moment and they do need help, so we can save as many of them as we can and have as healthy and functioning a society as possible. So I want to thank you all for sharing your stories, and I think it'll go a long way to helping expose and bring to light this problem that exists in our society. So thank you for sitting down and spending some time with us.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
No problem. Thanks.